Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the conference. Let's welcome Connor Johnson, Saba Mwine Chang, and Nakia Wright to the stage for our wellness moment today.
Hi, everyone. Hello. Good morning. Thank you for joining the plenary. I'm Connor Johnson.
And I'm Saba Mwine Chang.
And we are Grounded in Love. We're joined on stage by Nakia Wright, who will be providing sound healing during this session. Before we start lunch and before we get into the great discussion of this plenary, we want to take a moment just to center, to invite you to breathe. Saba is going to tell you a little bit about why breath work is important to her, and we'll take this opportunity just to reset, to center, to ground down for just a brief moment before lunch.
Excellent. So I just want to share a tiny bit about my story. I learned how to breathe in school. As a performing arts student, I found my body could find the breaths that brought tears and unbridled joy. As a student of meditation, breath brought me the calm like still water rippling under moonlight. And as a housing advocate, breath work has become a personal and collective practice of healing and liberation. Truly, our breath is magic, and each breath offers us an opportunity to begin again. And I love the quiet that just came upon us as we started to talk about breath. So now I'm going to demonstrate this breath practice with Connor's guidance.
We all know how to breathe. We breathe all day, every day. But often during distressing times like this, we breathe in our chest. It's short breath. It's shallow breath. What we're going to ask you to do today is to breathe deep, to breathe into your stomach. Start with breath in your stomach, work your way up to your chest, and to slow your breath down. A tool that we use to do this is a 4-7-8 breath. It's an inhale for a count of 4, a hold at the top for a count of 7, and exhale for a count of 8. I will demonstrate it 3 times, and I'll walk you through it 3 times, and I invite you to practice as we go. But before we do that, breathing and being at a table at a conference and doing a wellness moment can be a little awkward. So take a moment just to look around your table, smile, and say, "This is a safe space."
This is a safe space.
All right. Sounds good. I invite you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes. We'll keep our eyes open. We're watching the room. If you'd like to soften your gaze, if you'd like to close your eyes, it's up to you. But let's take a moment just to settle in. Maybe you need to roll out your shoulders. Maybe you need to roll out your neck a little bit. Check in on your feet. Are your feet on the ground? If you'd like to close your eyes or soften your gaze, this is a good time to do so. Let's first exhale out any stale air. And then start to breathe into your stomach, your chest. Exhale back out. I invite you to start to gently seal your lips and breathe in and out your nose, channeling your breath in through your nose. Exhale back out your nose. This is a 4-7-8 breath. We'll inhale for a count of 4. We'll hold for a count of 7. And we'll exhale for a count of 8. I'll take you through this for 3 rounds, and then we'll close the practice. First, exhale out any air, and then inhale through your nose. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold at the top. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last round. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take another big inhale, fill up. Open your mouth, sigh it out, let it all go. We need one more big sigh. Let's do it again. Inhale through your nose, hold at the top, big sigh out. You can open your eyes, come back to your space. Thank you so much for practicing with us. Thank you for taking a moment.
Thank you. We appreciate you. We love you.
We invite you to practice wellness throughout this conference. Nikia will be leading a sound bath this afternoon in the wellness space. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please welcome to the stage the Alliance's Chief Policy Officer, Steve Berg.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Berg. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at the National Alliance to End Homelessness. And I'm going to kick off this plenary session that's going to focus on tactics. First, before I start, though, I want to say one thing. I want to say we know that many people who are part of this big community are seeing their lives disrupted right now. And I want to tell you that we are with you. You are fantastic people. Keep going. All right, so tactics. By tactics, I mean concrete tools for making specific, immediate changes happen. These are the tools that people working on this issue use every day, and that's what we're going to hear about in this session. So we start our work by setting a goal that would clearly make the world a better place, that's based in love and in an understanding that all people are essentially one, like ending homelessness, right? And then from that, we articulate a strategy that shows the big pieces of how the goal can be achieved over time, showing that it's possible and even likely, building know-how, making money available, developing leadership, bringing together an alliance of people who will work with us. And then we use tactics to move closer every day to getting those big pieces of strategy done. So we'll include tactical tools to engage policymakers, to get them to see that homelessness, that ending homelessness, is something they should take on. And they should start by listening to you. They should start by listening to you. One tool is the message that many of them are getting loud and clear. Lots of people want homelessness ended. People are homeless now, and the larger group with lived experience of homelessness are speaking out more and more. There are people, like most in this room, who are mission-driven to care, including church leaders, including people in the field, including political activists. But there are others who may be unexpected, leaders in healthcare, because homelessness costs healthcare systems tremendous amounts of money. Local government officials, elected or not, business owners, police, who don't believe dealing with homelessness is their mission, and increasingly, the general public. These days, more policymakers get this part, that there's a demand for a solution. But the more important tool to engage them is the message that there's a proven way to do it. There's a proven way to do it that's achieved good results and brings people together rather than driving them apart, the way so-called solutions based on criminalization drive people apart. Policymakers who have to run for re-election often try to avoid issues that are going to involve lots of fighting. Consensus makes them more likely to be on board. We've seen people who demonstrated at City Hall to keep supportive housing out of the neighborhoods where they lived, and who a year after that housing was occupied have become the residents' biggest supporters. That's the kind of story that will get policymakers online. Another piece of tactics this conference talks about is tools that policymakers can use to develop the right policies, to help understanding for themselves and others about what goes into those proven solutions. Making sure sufficient modest rental housing exists by allocating different funding streams and building public support. Having rent or operating subsidies to make housing affordable to people with the lowest incomes, often through the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Targeting supportive services so that people can be stable in their housing, including intensive medical treatment, because it's no surprise to us that many people with serious mental illness or addiction or cancer or heart failure are on the streets, or that living on the streets brings on or exacerbates those conditions. And including services to help people secure better income or simply help dealing with complicated bureaucracies that challenge everyone. And a third piece of tactics we'll talk about is tools for providers to get and keep people housed, including help making the process simpler and more respectful for people who may have faced all kinds of discrimination, and tools to get mainstream systems on board, systems with bigger budgets and expertise to provide housing and services in a manner that aligns with our commitment to simplicity and respect. Tactics is what we do every day to make those good things happen. So now please allow me to kick off a great discussion among policymakers from here in California, the Alliance's Alex Vysotsky. There it is.
Good morning, folks. Can folks hear me? Great. Well, it's my privilege to be here up on the stage with two of our great state-level leaders. We have a couple elected officials with us who represent parts of the LA County area, and they've really made it their business to represent all of their districts, right? These are folks that are fighting for the most marginalized folks in their communities. And so that's why we wanted to make sure that they had the chance to get on stage and in this moment that we're in LA, tell you a little bit about how they're thinking about the path forward and how we fight for folks experiencing homelessness. So I'll start by introducing Assemblymember Isaac Bryan, who represents California's 55th Assembly District, which consists of Culver City, large parts of West and South Los Angeles. He's chair of the Committee on Natural Resources, vice chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus. He's authored key legislation to support foster youth, to protect people experiencing homelessness, to remove financial barriers to family reunification, and expand economic opportunity and protect communities from oil drilling. Please welcome Assemblymember Bryan. Then I'm also joined by Senator Sasha Renee Perez, who was elected to represent California's 25th Senate District in 2024, representing LA County's San Gabriel Valley, including the community of Altadena and parts of the Inland Empire. Senator Perez is a champion on homelessness. While serving as the mayor of the city of Alhambra, she voted to approve over $100 million for supportive services and stable housing, and led efforts to launch and led efforts to launch a working group on Latino homelessness to explore the challenges faced by our unhoused, undocumented community. So both of you, I think, feel a connection to the issue of homelessness in a way that I think we don't always see from elected leaders. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that connection and also how it impacts how you move through the halls of power when you're in Sacramento? Maybe Assemblyman, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, Alex. Thank y'all for convening. Thank you for the work that you do every single day. Thank you for allowing us to join you today. I've never been unhoused before. I've never been houseless. But I grew up in a family that always stepped in when others needed a hand. And what I mean by that is my mother was a foster mother for 26 years. Clap it up for mama. My mother wanted to step in when poverty let families fall through the cracks, when criminalization separated children from their parents. I was one of her foster children and then adopted. She adopted 9 of us. Yes. The crazy thing, though, is when you've been touched by the child welfare system or deep poverty or the conditions that lead to the child welfare system, it's not over once you've been adopted or once you've found your foster family. And so the generational impacts of that trauma have played out in my mother's 9 adopted children. And I have 2 siblings who are currently houseless. I have a younger brother who has spent more time unhoused or incarcerated than he has spent housed. He's never been employed. And I don't think it is a moral failing of his own. I've seen the way societal structures limited opportunities. And I've seen the moments, I know the moments, I could share with you some of the moments that could have made a drastic difference in whether I'm sitting here right now or sitting unhoused myself. And it's those opportunity structures or the lack thereof that inspired me to run for office. I ran for office to build more pathways into economic opportunity, to find gainful employment for everybody, to ensure that housing remains a human right and not a privilege or some commodity that's bought and sold and traded. And that's my connection to this issue, and I'm just grateful to have colleagues like Senator Perez who come in with the same heart and the same dedication and the same passion, and to be in a room with all of you who I can tell share those values.
I'm always so moved to hear from my colleagues, and especially Assemblymember Bryan, just, hearing your story, and just value having leaders like you in the legislature that I get to serve with. Because we know that this is a tough issue, and it's not going to be any single one of us that's going to be able to resolve this. It's us doing this together, so thank you. Very much like Assemblymember Bryan, I too have seen the impacts of the homelessness crisis within my own family. About 5.5 years ago, almost 6 years now, my cousin passed away after being chronically homeless for most of his life, and passed away due to accidental fentanyl overdose. A couple of months later, I lost my aunt in the same way. And I've had many family members that have gone down that pathway. When that happened, it was a very tragic situation for my entire family. I saw the impacts that it had on my father to, lose someone that he felt like he had a responsibility to look after after his brother had passed away. And even for myself, it was something that didn't just shake me, it haunted me in many ways. And after about a year of therapy and sitting down and reflecting, I decided that what I wanted to do was run for office and to be able to work on policies that could prevent something like this from happening to other people. At that time, that was in 2018, it felt as though not many folks were talking about the homelessness crisis. Not many folks were talking about the fentanyl crisis. And to be very frank, I was very angry at that point in my life, and I just wanted to do something about it. And that is when I decided to run for Alhambra City Council against an incumbent who was very conservative, and got elected there. And then after that, got appointed to the LASA Commission, where I happened to meet Alex, and we got to do some very important work together. So, this work is very personal to me. I think about the trauma that my family went through, and my goal in life is to make sure that other people don't have to go through that same pain, and making sure that we're protecting people and looking out for people and keeping in mind that these are loved ones, right? And I think sometimes we forget about that real human components of us needing to show compassion and kindness and love to one another.
Thank you both for sharing a little bit about yourselves and why it's so important to have you all up in Sacramento. Both of you, I think, had impacts of fire in your district, some of which very direct, of course, and some of which a little more indirect. What tactics do we need to be deploying? What do we need to be doing to ensure that moving forward, this recovery is centering the most vulnerable people, isn't leading to more homelessness like we've seen in many other communities after natural disasters? And maybe Senator Perez, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. So I represent, as was mentioned before, the Altadena and Pasadena area, much of the Angeles National Forest, and so the Eaton fires, if you all are familiar with the area that was impacted, that is all in my Senate district. This happened on the second day that I was in office, and so it was a very shocking event to have happen. We've never experienced something like this in the San Gabriel Valley before. Altadena is very different from some of the other communities, especially communities like the Palisades, just in terms of demographically speaking. It's a community that's very diverse, large Black and brown community, and large pockets of renters as well. And so, my mission and really my focus has been on ensuring that as we go through this process of recovery, that we center equity, that we're making sure that our generational Black and brown homeowners are being taken care of. These are folks that oftentimes did not have homeowners insurance. These are folks oftentimes that have not gone through the formalities of transferring their properties. So making sure that they're not held liable for that, they're not having to pay additional back taxes, and we're working on legislation around that. But in addition to that, also taking care of our renters, our immigrant community. Renters right now, if you've been impacted by the fires, there is very limited assistance available to you. You need to sign up for FEMA, sign up for the Small Business Administration, but I've talked with folks that are still fighting with their insurance companies trying to get rental assistance. It has been a very challenging time. The laws also aren't clear when it comes to landlords who does smoke and ash cleanup. So there's a lot of work that we have to do on the state end in order to clarify some of those policies. In addition to that, for our undocumented community, they are not eligible for any federal assistance. So you hear everybody talking about FEMA aid, about SBA grants. That is not anything that they have access to. So at the state level, what I'm working on is making it a budget priority to create a fund to assist those that are not eligible for FEMA aid, because we need to ensure that we have assistance readily available for those folks. We've been working on this every single day. We do workshops in Spanish for folks that need assistance, particularly for our immigrant community. I can tell you that people are scared for their lives right now. They're scared because you have the Trump administration that is threatening mass deportations and ICE raids, and at the same time, there's no federal aid available for them. And so they're living in their cars, scared of what is going to happen next. And we know if we don't do something to assist them, that those are individuals that are going to end up homeless. And so we really need to prioritize this as a state and keep that center focused. So this is something that I'm constantly talking about, and really, I think the way that we ensure something gets done about this is by continuing to center these conversations about equity. We saw what happened in Katrina. We've seen what's happened in Hawaii. If we're not intentional about this, about centering Black and brown communities and centering low-income communities and renters, we are the folks that are gonna lose out. And it's our job as legislators to make sure that that is not happening.
On her second day, y'all, Senator Perez is a gift in Sacramento. One of the untold secrets that some of you may know is that not all of your legislators work together or work well together. The senator and I have made a commitment to do work together. We share values and we share a vision for the world. So thank y'all for letting us talk about how we want to do some of this work together. My district didn't experience one of the major wildfires. We had a small fire in the Inglewood oil field, the King Fire. I want to thank Supervisor Holly Mitchell. She had 3 engines out there within 30 minutes. We put it out pretty quickly, but it did knock out power in a lot of South LA. So I apologize for that if your power went out and you weren't sure exactly why. We got it back up within 36 hours. But my district is not far from the Palisades at all. In fact, it's Mar Vista, Palms, Century City, Cheviot Hills, Baldwin Hills, parts of Beverly Hills, Miracle Mile, surrounding us on our west and northern side. And what we saw immediately after the fire, like immediately, is rental postings that were previously posted on January 1st or January 5th for $3,000, $3,500 a month be taken down and reposted for $6,000 a month, $8,000 a month, $14,000 a month in some instances. I was flagged right away by Community, and by the time I saw it, Community had already tracked 1,700 listings in our district. And so the senator and I teamed up, and we introduced AB 246, a bill that would call for a freeze in our rental market from the time that these fires broke out for a full year. Because as two of the handful of renters in the state legislature, we already knew the rent is too damn high to begin with. Folks are barely holding on, working 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs trying to keep a roof over their head, and the spillover effect from these wildfires is causing an overall increase in the rental market, real or unrealized. It's impacting the everyday people who are struggling. It's also messed up that you think that everyone in the Palisades is so well off that you should price gouge the hell out them in their most vulnerable moment. We're not gonna let that stand. And we know, as you all know, that our houseless population is not a bunch of folks from all over the country who really wanted to see the beach. We got nice beaches, but it's not that. It is actually everyday Angelenos who are holding on by a thread, trying to keep up with the cost of living, trying to keep up with the stagnation of wages. And we know that if we push them any further, it will spill over into our streets at the very time where we are finally bringing down the curb of the increase. All other major cities were failing to make progress. In Los Angeles, you were making that progress, and we have to do all we can at the state level to ensure that that progress continues.
So I think the thing I would love to close on is you've both mentioned some really major threats to the progress, right? Whether it's cuts to federal funding, whether it's rising criminalization. I don't think anybody is more familiar with those threats and dealing with them in day-to-day as much as this room of folks. What do we need to do in the months ahead to keep up the fight, to keep making progress on homelessness and keep up the fight for folks experiencing homelessness? Senator Perez, and then Assemblymember Bryan, if you want to close us out.
Well, oh my goodness, there's legislation that I think both myself and Assemblymember Bryan are working on to address this exact issue. And as you just heard him share, this issue around price gouging, the housing crisis. I mean, this has become more exacerbated than ever before. We had 9,000 people lose their homes just in Altadena. And so you think about the impact that that has on the rental market already. It has been incredibly challenging. I'm a renter myself, and this has been some of the highest rental prices I've ever seen in my lifetime. And it has just made everything so much more challenging for our communities to navigate. I want to talk a little bit about this criminalization piece, though, and I know Alex and I, we've talked a lot about this. It has been incredibly disturbing to watch the trend of criminalization, move not just across the country, but also here in California. You have cities like the city of Fresno that are fining people $1,000 simply for living out on the streets. We had the city of Fremont just a couple of weeks ago say that they were going to start implementing fines, and this passed, to people that are aiding and abetting those that are homeless. So that could mean simply providing somebody with water or with assistance could be a fine for someone simply for trying to assist somebody and being a good Samaritan. We're working on legislation to make it so that cities and counties cannot fine people for being homeless. We have to draw the lines somewhere here in California. And we knew after the Grants Pass decision, it was very frustrating to see some of the statements that came out after the Grants Pass decision. But you all here realize that Grants Pass basically allowed for us to criminalize poverty. It basically said that it is okay to fine people for living out on the streets. But we know that that's not a real solution to resolving homelessness. We know it actually perpetuates the cycle of homelessness. And I want to share with you all something as to why this is so personal to me as well. My cousin, when he passed away in Las Vegas in Clark County. Clark County introduced fines and jail stays for those living out on the streets the year before. And so I believe that there is a direct correlation there, right? When we pass these types of policies, people try to hide, they move inside, it leads to deaths when we pass these sorts of policies in our local cities. So, I take this very seriously. I know, Assemblymember Brian does as well. We really need to be firm in stating that criminalizing poverty is not going to be acceptable here in the state of California. And, I'm hoping that we'll be able to pass this. I understand this is probably going to be a difficult measure that will move forward, and we're going to need all of you in this room to help us with advocating on this, but it is the right thing to do, and it's something that is so necessary at this time, especially as we continue to see us move more conservatively on these issues.
I've got a bunch of thoughts. We could sit here and talk all day. Definitely got some legislation to help us make progress. We found that there were thousands of students in LAUSD who are unhoused, and because they're unhoused, they're unable to access the free dental and vision screenings of other students, right? Their housing status, their housing insecurity is proving to be a barrier for them to access the same quality of care that we provide to all students for free. So we have legislation that will remove that barrier and allow our unhoused students to benefit from the social safety nets that we've built for all students. We also have legislation, thank you. A couple of years ago, I tried to waive parking tickets for our brothers and sisters who lose their home and then you sleep in your car temporarily while you try to get on your feet. I know this because it's what my brother did, and I helped him buy a car, and then he got a ticket, and he couldn't pay this ticket, and then his car got towed, and then it got towed, and he couldn't afford to impound it, and then I saw him at VOA, and then I saw him in Pershing Square, and then I saw him on Skid Row. And during that entire journey, I thought to myself, man, if we could have just kept him in his car as we worked to get him back into housing, The worst part is we spend more money trying to collect these tickets than we get back. Talk about government inefficiency. It's like, when are folks gonna realize that going after poor people is the most inefficient government operation we have ever established? The last thing I'll say about this, how we continue to make progress, is we have to tell the truth. We have to be willing to fight for that truth. If you've checked out of X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it today, check back in and check in on Blue Sky and check in all these forums where we used to organize that they've purchased and taken over so they can control the narrative, because they are lying about what's happening. Somehow nonprofits and community-based organizations and Medicaid became bad things. That's insanity. Now is the time where we shouldn't just be putting people over profits, we should be putting people over everything. And it's the same time that they're trying to cut this safety net, and we can't allow it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen online, and you've seen it too, we spend $100 million a year as a city to solve homelessness, and it's getting worse. Nobody says that we spend $4 billion feeding our kids school lunch, but they're still hungry. Nobody says we spend $20 billion a year on our state prisons and we just keep sending people right back. Nobody talks about all the money we spend on incarceration and criminalization, but then they complain that crime is still high. They'll lie about that too. We spend money to help people, and people have dynamic needs. You don't solve those needs. You restructure the way government works so that it is always meeting those needs. You can't privatize that. You can't doge that. You can't erase that. You need to invest in that. That's how we make progress.
I've got nothing worthwhile to say after that. Please give some love to these two incredible leaders.
Thank you so much for that wonderful panel. As a reminder, please limit your table conversations while the plenaries are going on. And I'd like to welcome to the stage the Alliance's Senior Research Analyst and Coordinator, Nicole Dubois.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Dubois, and I am a researcher with the Homelessness Research Institute at the Alliance. Before I introduce our next wonderful panel, I just want to briefly mention some of HRI's recent and upcoming research on unsheltered homelessness. Over the past few months, I worked with members of our research network to release 3 short briefs that summarize the extensive evidence of the harms of criminalizing homelessness. In the briefs, we describe how criminalization perpetrates substantial harm to individual and public health and safety, squanders public resources, and only worsens the crisis. We hope these materials are useful to you as you educate the public and lawmakers about how not to address unsheltered homelessness. We also have a few projects in progress that will uplift what is working to address unsheltered homelessness. We'll be spotlighting a few communities that have engaged in intentional strategies, as well as closely following the work of the recipients of HUD Special NOFO to address rural and unsheltered homelessness, so please stay tuned for those. My favorite part of my job is collaborating with you, people in communities across the country who are doing the work to end homelessness. It is an honor to get to learn from you, and I hope that you know each time we reach out with a research request how much it means to us when you take the time out of your incredibly busy days to respond. And so now I'm delighted to welcome this next panel, which will focus on evidence-based strategies to respond to unsheltered homelessness at a community level. Our panelists include Luis Ilario, appointed by the Mayor of Newark to lead the city's first Office of Homeless Services in 2022, Born and raised in Newark, he has over 15 years of experience in government and nonprofits leading housing and homeless initiatives. Carolyn Ross, the president and CEO of All Chicago Making Homelessness History, which leads Chicago's system response to ending homelessness. She has extensive executive leadership experience, including previous roles in child welfare, criminal justice, and treatment and recovery services. Kenzie Strubank, the Assistant Director for Homeless Programs at the Kentucky Housing Corporation, where she leads the homeless programs teams and the Kentucky Balance of State Continuum of Care. She began her work of ending homelessness in Kentucky 16 years ago with positions in a domestic violence shelter, permanent supportive housing programs, and coordinated entry. Claire Herbert, an associate professor at the University of Oregon, where her research focuses on law, housing, property, and urban sociology. She is currently writing a book on unsheltered homelessness in America. Seiron Fu will moderate the panel. He leads the Conrad and Hilton Foundation's programmatic and advocacy goals in realizing a Los Angeles where homelessness can and should be rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. He previously held roles in public policy and philanthropy throughout California. I've had the pleasure of working with each of these individuals and communities through my research with HRI. We asked them to join us today because, as Steve said at the top of the plenary, today's theme is tactics. Our aim over the next half hour is for you to hear ideas that inspire you, ideas that you can take home and implement in your own communities. And so, please come join us.
Good afternoon. Right, so our panelists are going to join us on stage. Thank you, Nicole, for that warm introduction. It may be the only thing that is warm in here at the moment. So some of you may wonder why it's so cold in this room today, and I just want to introduce you to the cast of Frozen 3 standing here before you. So I have to ask you all, do you want to build a snowman? No, seriously, it's inspiring to hear people like Assemblymember Bryan and Senator Perez. I'm fortunate to live in a state where we have leaders such as the Assemblymember and Senator, and there are extraordinary individuals across the country, some of whom are here today on this panel, who will share the tactics, translating the research and the political will into real solutions. To ground us in our conversation today, the first question will go to the author of all those resources that you just saw Nicole share, and that's to you, Claire. Can you ground us in evidence and tell us what's working in response to unsheltered homelessness?
Absolutely. So in some ways, I feel like I'm, preaching to the crowd here. Probably know a lot of this from your experiences working on this problem. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what we know works, and I'm also going to talk about what we know doesn't work and what we need to stop doing. So despite a recent Heritage Foundation report calling for an end to housing first, we do have a wealth of longitudinal research that shows that prioritizing low barrier housing is largely successful at keeping folks housed. Even those who have been experiencing chronic homelessness, these efforts also reduce government costs in other arenas, right? It saves us costs of policing, other emergency medical services, emergency room budgets, and other government departments that are increasingly involved in the maintenance and regulation of public space, which is where unsheltered people are often living. We know that rapid rehousing is crucial for preventing an early instance of homelessness from becoming a case of chronic homelessness, because it's when it becomes chronic that obstacles to housing really escalate. We know that outreach workers who work to establish trust with unsheltered communities are much more successful at connecting people with resources, with getting people housed, than the police. We also know that low barrier shelters are a great way to get people inside, right? When pets, partners, and possessions are allowed, people are much more willing to move inside. And the rise, we also know that the rise in unsheltered homelessness is not because folks are choosing to be homeless, but rather that every year across the country, we are short an estimated 200,000 shelter beds just for adults every night. So what doesn't work, and what actually prolongs and exacerbates unsheltered homelessness, are various forms of criminalization that we're seeing ramp up across the country. When encampments, both tent and vehicle encampments, are displaced, these engagements with the criminal justice system cause sort of upstream and downstream effects. When people are sent to jail even for a couple of days, they lose jobs, they lose their possessions. And we know that having a criminal record makes securing formal housing much, much harder. We also know that unhoused people are largely unable to pay the fines, as you just heard from our previous panelists, but that issuing these citations costs our government a lot of money. Even without criminal justice involvement, though, what I hear a lot in my work is police who are trying to gain compliance. They don't want to issue tickets, they don't want to arrest people. But even when that kind of criminal justice element of it is absent from displacement, we know that people are harmed, especially their health, their safety. So research shows that unsheltered people are more likely to move to dangerous spaces when they're displaced. They're increasingly at risk when they have to move. They lose their belongings, they lose IDs, computers, medication, other health equipment, and losing these possessions makes daily life harder. It makes exiting homelessness more difficult. Forced moves disrupt people's ability to find and maintain employment. We know that a lot of our unhoused people are employed, they are working, they're trying to save money to exit homelessness. And when they're moved, oftentimes they lose their jobs as well. Sometimes it's the stress and the time and the labor of moving. Sometimes it's because they lose access to transportation that would have allowed them to get to work. Displacement also disrupts community ties. Encampments are oftentimes communities, and those bonds are really important for people's survival and well-being. Displacement also makes it harder for outreach workers to find folks and keep them connected with services and help them get into housing. People experiencing unsheltered homelessness, police, and other government workers who interact with them increasingly call encampment removals a game of whack-a-mole. They're temporarily displacing the problem from one sidewalk to another, from one neighborhood to another, and from one government department to another. Government workers are frustrated with being tasked with clearing encampments. It's a significant waste of resources, and we are essentially funding the continuation of homelessness rather than its resolution.
Thank you so much, Claire. So I have not been gifted with the ability to do research. And so one of the things, if you're like me and you just listen to Claire, you might be going, that's a lot. And how do I digest all of this? And one of the things I so appreciate about the Alliance and Claire is we take research and it doesn't sit on the shelf, because there's a lot of research just sitting on the shelf that we all know collecting dust. And so we have three extraordinary panelists who will talk about that research and translate that research into practice. So I'll turn it over to you, Carolyn. Let's just hear from you about the tactics. What's working? What have we learned in Chicago, from your experience in Chicago?
Thank you, and hello everybody. It's good to be here with you. I must say to our California partners, I was a little disappointed. All these people here, we didn't have a red carpet for them to walk in on. I see you and you're appreciated. In Chicago, don't pay attention to what you hear on the news, because we have such hardworking partners that have come together to try to address this issue, to try to make sure that we're meeting the needs of people who are facing homelessness or experiencing homelessness. So when we pretty much got surprised by the pandemic like everybody else, we challenged our staff and our partners to start thinking outside of the box, because it very quickly felt like we were going to have to start thinking differently and create things differently. We have great partners in Chicago. Some of them are here today with our city partners, our funding partners. And so when we don't have a solution, we've been able to come together, put our heads together, and figure out how to get through it. And so the thing I'm most proud of is we have tried to learn from those things that we've tried, and we've been able to pass some of the things on with all the lessons that we learned from the research that we've had partners with to look at the works that we're doing here in Chicago. And it kind of morphed into what's helping us the most today. Really finding ways to meet people where they are, be able to develop new resources or resources that haven't been touched before to make sure people can get connected with housing. The Housing First model has been a very strong idea for us to build a lot of our services on. And Chicago has really done a pretty effective job of trying to meet the needs, despite the pandemic, despite the ongoing visits by new arrivals, despite even politicians and folks saying, this is a problem, why aren't you doing something about it? And so it's important for us to keep talking about this, and I am a strong believer that the needs of people are ever changing. We need to stay on our toes and be able to respond to those changes as they come up. No judgment, no bias, receive and start serving people from the point of where they are.
Thank you, Carolyn. And apologies about the absence of red carpets. They're all being used this Sunday for the Oscars here in LA. So let's go a little bit south of Chicago to the great state of Kentucky. And Kenzie, share with us your experience. What are the tactics, particularly given the different geographies and different types of communities that you're leading in Kentucky?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I have to start out with saying it is an honor to be here and to discuss unsheltered homelessness, particularly for our continuum of care. Kentucky is one of the poorest states in the country. It lacks infrastructure locally around the state from corner to corner. We do not have enough resources. So as you can imagine, our homeless response system mirrors that. And I don't think my team and I ever thought that we'd be on a stage discussing our tactics and strategies to address unsheltered homelessness to begin with. So historically, Kentucky as a state has a pretty weak shelter system, funding-wise and capacity-wise. And so we kind of lacked, up to the pandemic, an accurate front door to our system. Street outreach was not a thing that we did or were able to fund at all. We don't receive any state money in our annual budget to support shelter operations, so we are solely relying on ESG funds in our state, in our system, to operate shelters. And so if those of you out there receive ESG funds, you know that formula is not great, and you're not getting the funds that you need. So we have approximately $2.5 million that we get annually in ESG to support over 35 organizations around our state. We represent 118 communities, counties in our state, and it is just not enough. And so with the pandemic coming, I think our system did a really great job of being bold, being innovative, taking big risks, doing things like funding street outreach. What? We're gonna go outside, we're gonna find people, we're gonna create that front door to our system that our shelters cannot address, and we're gonna find people. And it's been a wild ride, it has been a worthwhile ride. We have 100% fully funded street outreach in our 15 subregions now, which we can talk about a little later. Thank you. And we finally have data. We finally have data. We didn't have data on unsheltered homelessness before that. So that's really helped us see where our gaps are, and it has allowed us to mobilize and continue to mobilize. We've spent essentially the past 5 years focusing on system preparedness, and system preparedness for infectious disease at the time, and now for the extreme challenges that we face both as a state and as a country moving forward.
Thank you so much, Kenzie. And now we'll jog a little to the east, to the great state of New Jersey. Let's share more about what you're doing in the city of Newark.
Yes, so I just want to say I have a 10-minute walk here because I'm in another hotel, so I regretted wearing a wool blazer, but I was sweating on the way over here, but boy, I'm so glad I have this wool blazer. I am freezing, at least my hands are. Thank you again for having us here. If you haven't been to the city of Newark, you are welcome to visit. We have great people, great culture, great restaurants. So let me know, text me if you're in the area. So in 2022, our best tactic is strategy, right? So in 2022, our mayor launched a comprehensive plan to end homelessness in our city that centers around 3 strategies, and one included reducing and better addressing unsheltered homelessness in our city. And in year 1 of the plan, we literally hit the ground to work on ways to better engage and serve our residents. We strengthened our street outreach, which is really a key component, expanded emergency housing by 30%. We actually identified a vacant hotel that we're able to provide 275 beds to our most vulnerable. Brought together all the partners, right, across the ecosystem, government partners, state and county levels, and also our community partners, right? So EMS, police, public works, right? Mobile crisis teams and others to discuss how to better work with each other. We also improved our data collection and reporting, which helped us, of course, better understand the population and to better, develop better solutions. So these quick actions and, community mobilization helped us achieve great results in year 1. We were actually able to reduce street homelessness by 57% in that first year. But the story doesn't end there, right? We all know that it's a moving target. So in year 2, we actually began to see some of those gains being taken away by inflow, right? Because there's always inflow and outflow. So we decided to do more in 2024. We opened a 24-room transitional housing community on city land that converted containers to beautiful residential units with many, many amenities. We launched a texting service for the public to use. Right? We wanted to engage the community wide, right? So, anyone can identify someone, send a quick text. Those texts are sent to our street outreach workers who then respond. We also had a major expansion in street outreach efforts. We went 24/7 for the first time ever in our city, added clinical teams, street medicine teams, and more outreach workers, of course, on the ground. And we ended 2024 with probably the most groundbreaking project we've seen, is a partnership with the local housing authority to designate over 200 vacant units for chronically homeless residents. They're vacant and need of repair. The city of Newark, released a municipal bond of $6 million to repair the units and designate them for our most vulnerable. They are living on the streets or in our shelters. So we've responded in a big way, but it's, we're not done yet. We're moving into 2025 with other projects as well. We are creating an 8,000 square feet drop-in center. We're adding an additional transitional housing community we're calling Resilient Hope, a hotel conversion project, and other initiatives that we have in plan. So we're really excited about this work in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. So not everyone's going to have a Assemblymember Bryan or a Senator Perez representing them in their state legislature or in their local jurisdiction. And I'm curious to hear, and we'll work backwards this time. So Louis, I apologize, you have to go twice in a row. But how are you managing to build political and community will for some of these solutions? And also, because you mentioned both multiple prongs of the strategy, how are you holding the tension about needing to build more interim housing and permanent housing? And that for elected officials, the desire to address unsheltered homelessness in the present often means putting more resources into interim housing, when we know from an evidence perspective, over the long term, that's not an efficient allocation of resources. So that's for all 3 of you. And curious about how you're building political will and holding that tension and balance of more interim and more permanent housing.
Yeah, I mean, it's about, creating urgency around the issue. I think we all agree we have urgency in here, right? But how do you communicate that and deliver that to the community, right, as a whole. And it really starts with leadership, right? Our mayor really, released a plan. It was a call to action to invite all members of our community to contribute to this. The plan itself that we released in 2022 is titled The Path Home, Collaborating Across Our Community. So we purposely put that in there. And in Newark, we believe in lifting heavy issues together, right? So if something is too heavy, you ask for help, whether that person is bringing strength or leverage, right? You'll need them to lift a heavy object. And it's exactly what we did in Newark. Many partners for various sectors stepped in, answered the call, joined the work to align their efforts to support the plan. Some of our most impactful partnerships actually have been public and private. They actually helped our efforts by increasing our capacity, raising funds for new programs and initiatives in the city, and of course, right, we all need this, right, technical assistance. I would just want to offer some of those examples of partnerships. We have the Newark Alliance, which is a nonprofit in the city of Newark that for decades have brought together and collaborated with leaders from business, real estate, health, and other institutions to work on economic development. But they actually pivoted and decided to support the mayor's plan once it was announced. And through this partnership, we were able to kind of unlock private dollars to support our work. Most recently, they raised funding for us to launch a new clinical metro team that deploy a psychiatric nurse practitioner and a social worker in hotspots in the downtown area. I want to give a shout out, of course, to state government, right? So the State of New Jersey Office of Homelessness Prevention, who might be in the room as well. They've been a great government partner in this effort. Their team has provided deep data analytics, helped us create and train a data analyst in our office, and strategically, right, funded programs that directly impacted our work. So another great partner of ours that really contributed to this work. And the last partner that I want to shout out is Bloomberg Associates, which is part of Bloomberg Philanthropies. They have been a partner since day one, has provided, and Christian, who might be in the room as well, has helped our office develop the plan, carry out strategies, and really measure our work. And we really would not be here, gotten this far, if it wasn't from the support of public and private partners. And so we're thankful. No city can do this alone. No partner can do this alone. It's going to take all of us, including private partners. So we got to tap into that private investments as well.
Kenzie, over to you.
So Kentucky Housing Corporation, my organization, is the state housing finance agency for Kentucky. We are a super large organization. We have several hundred employees. And I like to joke, we are uniquely positioned for greatness. Doesn't mean that we always were uniquely positioned for greatness, but we are in this space, in this moment, which we are so lucky for. So in addition to all of the homelessness work that my team and I do with our partners in collaboration, we're a funder, and that's been really, really helpful. And we don't have to argue with anyone but ourselves in Kentucky, because we are lucky enough that we are over the Emergency Solutions Grant, the home program. We're the largest COC recipient that we sub-grant out. We do HOPWA, and we also happen to be the largest PHA in the state in another department at our organization, where our regular HCV program oversees 87 counties, and then we have 3 specialized HCV programs that are geared towards ending homelessness, and that's been expanded to serve all 118 counties of our COC. We also were super busy during the pandemic. We received the CARES Act award for ESG. We received all of the EHVs for the state. We received the ERA 1 and ERA 2 funds, as well as the Home American Rescue Plan Act funding. And so we were in a really fortunate place by the time the world felt like it was ending in 2020, because we had worked out some of the kinks between the different departments within our organization, and really centered on housing everybody in every which way that we can, whether it's through our LIHTC, whether it's through homeless programs, whether it's through our PHA side. We're all very centered on the mission of getting people into housing and keeping people housed. And so with that internal partnership, which sounds like it would be easy to do, in an organization. If you work for a large organization or a small one, sometimes it's not. We were able to make, like I had mentioned, really bold decisions and took really bold risks in our strategy to address all the gaps within our housing continuum system and our homeless response system. So those partnerships led to creating a team of people that are on the ground every day doing direct service for the first time in our organization, which is a quasi-state government organization that typically doesn't do that type of work, to connect people who are street homeless to our specialized housing vouchers. We were able to allocate millions of dollars towards a rapid rehousing-like type of program, specifically with our ERA2 funds, so that when the CARES Act money was gone, we still had that capacity in place. We were able to get buy-in from our development side of our team to use some of our Home American Rescue Plan Act money to fund specifically street outreach for when the CARES Act money was gone, and that was before the special NOFO was the thing that we knew about. So we were able to leverage all of our funding sources and all of our areas of expertise throughout the past 5 years to get us to where we are today. But of course, we have amazing partnerships with all of the agencies that we support day in and out. We spent a lot of time throughout the pandemic, really cultivating those relationships. We are a very hands-on, I think, COC lead organization. We also love to be together. If you've ever been to a conference with the Kentuckians, we really love each other. We really believe in community. And so funding is one thing, and partnerships is one thing, but I think what we've done a really good job with is true collaboration and building rapport and building trust and taking risks together, right? And making sure that the organizations that are doing that frontline work feel safe and supported. Most of the people who work on my team are former direct service providers, like in the days where we argued about housing first originally and coordinated entry originally. And so we bring that perspective to the work that we do, and we work for our communities and our organizations. And I think that that level of internal and then external buy-in has really allowed us to keep up that momentum that we started in 2020 and has really accelerated and advanced our work together.
So when we talked earlier about All Chicago's role, I mean, we're the system lead. We also are the lead with the HMIS system for data collection and management, and as well coordinated entry. And the coordinated entry just kind of came in within the last year and a half. But because we had those pieces and our partnerships, we found ourselves very uniquely positioned to get innovative and to start pulling together those resources to make sure that we were making the greatest impact with them. So we've met frequently with our city partners, our state partners, and our private funding partners, our provider partners, to make sure everybody is aligned and on the same page to know that we're going to focus on these things. And so Chicago was very fortunate in that we first we received the Unsheltered, we were a recipient of the Unsheltered NOFO to really kind of up our game a little bit on our unsheltered homelessness. It allowed us to do some of the very similar things you all mentioned, expand our outreach to make sure that we were paying attention to areas that were either underserved or we hadn't distributed the resources well. So we set up a sector system by zip code and using that information from our system to decide where we could plant things. And as well, we were also part of the All Inside initiative. Chicago was one of the cities that was selected to be a part of the initiative launched by the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness. All that being said, our job was to be kind of like a conductor to make sure everything was in place, because we are staunch believers in that we cannot do this work alone. And so at the state level, in 2021, our governor pushed and established the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness on a statewide level. And we have a statewide chief homelessness officer. In the last year, kind of learning from that, our philanthropic partners worked with the city to create the position of the chief homelessness officer. And so we have those supports, as well as our strongest partner at the city is the Department of Family and Support Services. They manage ESG funds, for example. Our goal was to learn what they know, to know what was coming in, and to offer our assistance to do the process to identify those resources, identify partners who could take on those roles, and to be able to service. So with the Unsheltered Homelessness Initiative, we were able to expand our outreach teams. We created 7 new outreach teams. Of course, it's a very pressing issue for me on our black and brown and purple and green and all those people. The point is, we are so familiar with the concept of division. And because we label people so much, we lose sight, or some of our folks lose sight, of the real issue is, forget all that other stuff, the common issue is that they're homeless, they're unhoused. And so when we began to really get our partners to focus on that, it was less of a distraction. And so through that process, we also created an initiative. First, we started with expedited housing, because we wanted to shorten that time from the time people enter the system to get housed. And then we did a white paper on it. We sat there and we looked at the data to see how effective it was. We were able to shorten that time in a particular year. Because one thing we know for sure, the beginning of last year, the first 6 months, for every one person who entered our system, that was housed, every one person that was housed, 9 new people entered the system. And so you can't get overwhelmed with that. You got to get on your guard and start replanning and to make sure we're hitting those resources. One thing we had put into place from the expedited housing is we created accelerated moving events. They're very popular. Why? Because they work. Last year we did over 30 AMEs, and basically I call it one-stop shopping, but we will set up a day in partnership, the city, their outreach teams help us identify areas that people were needing services, encampments. For example, we also try to protect the privacy of those who have been victims of gender-based violence or domestic violence. We don't bring them out in the open. We go to where they are and have those type of events. We have our partners there. We bring in other resources to help them get identification, to help them, one, look at different parts of the city they want to move to, give them 2 choices. They select that day after their application is completed. We have furniture partners who help make sure that they have a full move-in capacity to get that done. And it's a real feel-good. It's about bringing attention to folks that we do care, and that when there's that opportunity, we're going to serve it. So it's popular because everybody wants one. And it's not intended to clean out encampments. It is a housing event. And that's part of the piece when you ask about working with the political will. We look at it as community will, getting people to understand what we're trying to do here and join them to be a part of that process. So we're real proud of those types of initiatives, and we'll continue them on as we move forward.
Thank you, Carolyn. Well, our time is up, and I know we're the barrier to lunch. So we will wrap up, and 10 seconds per person, and I will count and cut you off. I'll ask the folks to cut off your mic. 10 seconds. What's one piece of advice you want to share with the audience as we do this work? Claire, we'll start with you. We'll work your way down. 10 seconds. One piece of advice.
Homeless policy is housing policy and vice versa. We cannot implement housing first if we don't have enough housing to put people into. So we need to be collaborating across those different sectors.
Carolyn?
10 seconds. Okay, 8. So I think the important piece is keep your head up and keep moving forward. It's really important because people are counting on all of us to help them and to get them housed. They're counting on us. Take care of yourself so you can be the best you for them, and keep trying new things.
Kenzie?
I would say lead with authenticity. Do not be afraid of the word no. Ask for what you want. Keep asking for what you want. Own your own narrative as a system, and you keep at it until you get through whatever red tape you might have, and you get the work done, and you don't stop.
All right, Lewis.
I will say that if there's no sense of urgency in your community, you're going to have to create it. So use stories, use data, make noise, engage the city, elected officials, your community and make a lot of noise. Folks are going to pay attention and they're going to follow.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention. Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you for that panel. Please welcome to the stage the Alliance's Vice President of Research and Evidence, Joy Moses.
I'm the last person, I promise. I know we're running a little bit over, and I know you're eager to have lunch. So I'm just going to say a few words. The practices that you just heard about are the types of things that my team spends time researching. We try to discover things that are being developed in communities like Newark, like Chicago, and we translate those ideas into good practice and policy that can be shared with people across the country. If you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to review some of our work and draw upon it, and also if you have an opportunity to share with us your thoughts as well. We have various projects going on in the workforce space. Many of you participated in a survey that we did recently. We have a list of briefs that we produced from that, some of them focused on unsheltered workers, workers of color. There were a lot of great insights there that I think can inform our work going forward in the future. Similarly, we have work happening in other spaces. We have a growing network of 500 researchers who are both convening to share their work with one another, but also to contribute to our efforts. Claire, who was on our previous panel, she was one of the folks who's been contributing to our work and our efforts to inform you about best practices. And finally, we have been working with the Lived Expertise Research Advisory Board that has been developing their own research projects focused on how we can better incorporate people with lived experience into the work of ending homelessness. So lastly, I will do a little pitch for you to attend our Q&A this evening at 5:30 in the California Ballroom. Excuse me, it's an opportunity for you to ask questions of our leadership about things that are happening in the federal government at this moment. As you know, there's been some change. And it's also an opportunity, I think, for us to have community, for you to share your thoughts and your concerns. Having met a couple of you, I'm assuming that you have some things to say. So please do come out and participate. And so I think with that, I can close out, unless you want to hear about my dissertation on, oh, I think you want to eat. Okay. Let's eat.
Thank you to all of today's plenary speakers. We have a quick update on session timing and changes. Workshop Block 4 will now start at 2:30 p.m. and end at 3:45 p.m. The next set of workshops will start at 4 o'clock p.m. and end at 5:15. Transformation talks will be pushed back by 30 minutes, and then the Alliance Q&A will still begin at 5:30 p.m. Thank you, and enjoy your afternoon.